That's Laura Kunzberg. As we said, President Biden is now in Brussels. That's where the NATO summit will be taking place. And Kurt Volker is former US ambassador to NATO, who joins us now from Washington. Kurt, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, first of all, on the sort of the optics, if you like, or the way these people are going to get on together, there's no big bruiser in the middle of it who is very happy to put people's noses out of joint. Joe Biden's going to fit in rather more comfortably, clearly. What, though, does he need to do you think, for NATO?
Well, first off, your first point is an important point, that this will be a way of showing American support for and respect for NATO and a desire for the United States to lead NATO into the future. So this is important, and I think it is the main message. In addition to that, there will be an effort to have NATO look forward. What is the vision for 2030? There was a study group that was done by a group of senior national experts some time ago that will now be formalized by NATO as they look ahead, creating a vision for NATO 2030. Part of that will be dealing with China and 5G and new types of threats and challenges, something that NATO has not done before.
And another part of that will be dealing with Russia, of course, which is a constant thorn in the side, as you would know only too well as a former special representative for Ukraine as well. What should NATO and particularly President Biden, who will be confronting Vladimir Putin in a couple of days, what should they be laying out here?
Well, I think that it is very important that President Biden reassure allies in Central and Eastern Europe that he is indeed going to be pushing back very hard on Vladimir Putin and Russia's aggressive policies that they have implemented over the last several years. There is a lot of worry about that in Poland, in the Baltic states, and elsewhere. So he needs to be very reassuring that he's going to be very firm with Putin on that.
Are you Kurt, are you expecting that? Because as you say, you're right. The Czechs, the Poles, they'll be desperate to hear that sort of language.
No, they will. And I think the language will come from President Biden. The question is whether the deeds will come from the United States and other allies as well. I think there are a few things we've already seen that cause concern. The green light to Nord Stream 2, there's not going to be any U.S. sanctions to block that. The Russian military buildup around Ukraine when the United States turned around 2 warships. The British put in the warships into the Black Sea, but the U.S. turned them around. So they're going to want an assurance that the U.S. will be very firm on this, and they're going to want to see it in action. And one thing that I would recommend that NATO do is support the Czechs. The Czechs have had this diplomatic row with Russia because of the explosion at an ammunition dump that Russian GRU officers were responsible for and that killed Czech citizens. And the Czechs have expelled Russian diplomats as a result. I think some more solidarity from other NATO countries in support of the Czechs on this would be very important.
I think you've made an interesting point there, more solidarity, because there is a reality that amongst the membership of NATO, it has become a bit disparate and lacking in mutual support, which of course is meant to be the cornerstone of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yes, that is exactly right. And I do have to give NATO credit for recognizing this and saying we've got to pull together around a common vision for the future. The fact, however, is that we don't have that common vision at the moment, whether it's in how we deal with Russia or what kind of threat China represents, or whether NATO is the right place to talk about a Chinese threat.
Kurt, a pleasure to speak to you. Kurt Volker joining us there from Washington. Nice to see the London bus in the background too.